Hey everybody, we're going to get started. We're running a little over time, so you could make your way back to your seat or wherever you're going to stand. Did anybody go to scout camp or some other kind of camp? Did you do this? When the hand goes up? No, nobody. The mouth goes shut. I'll have to learn the clapping sign. Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to get started. We've got the Recycling Partnership here, and they always give us great information. I'm Shirlene Sitton. If you haven't met me, I'm the Director for Environmental Services for the City of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I say that because I know there's a Santa Fe in Texas, and there's probably, I think there's one in California, so just to be clear. I am the first Vice President of the MWMA, and that just means that we're going to have this conference in Santa Fe next year, so I can't wait to see you. It's beautiful in Santa Fe in the fall, too, and I think you'll really love it. That is chili season in New Mexico, so you'll look forward to eating lots of green chili. You can eat red chili if you want, but I'm a green chili girl. We are loving Minneapolis. A bunch of us went to dinner last night. We walked across the bridge. It was beautiful. So I just want to say I am really impressed with what a beautiful, clean city this is and what a great conference this is, and thank the Minneapolis team for having us and all the work they've done. Our next session focuses on improving recycling access. And when we think about improving access, there's a lot of distinct or discrete issues to consider. First, we need to think about whether our residents even have access to recycling. We have a robust curbside program in Santa Fe, but all of our residents don't have access to that. So we're always looking for ways to improve that. We also need to think about whether our residents Sorry, I screwed that up. Then there's a reality that in some cities we have access to legislative or policy tools like bottle bills and single-use plastic bans or other kinds of legislation. In Santa Fe, we have a plastic bag ban on grocery bags, and then we have a fee on if you use a grocery bag at the store that's paper. So we all have different kinds of legislative tools and the ability or want of your public officials to actually use those tools. Then there's a continuing conversation and challenge of providing services or collecting recycling from multifamily units and how to go about doing that the best way. And that is something I've definitely dealt with throughout my career. Before I lived in Santa Fe, I lived in a 2-university town, and about half of our housing units were multifamily. And so if I'm always looking for great ideas on that. So in some states and in some communities, we're able to legislate that, and in some we're not. Brenda, I think, made a comment about that earlier. We know where those states are. So today we're joined by Charlotte Pitt and Adam Gendel. Great. From the Recycling Partnership, which is an organization that basically exists for helping us with this purpose, gaining access to recycling and improving the programs. Charlotte and Adam are going to talk about the state of recycling in this country and some ways that we can improve it. And they're also going to share some tools that the Recycling Partnership has developed, which can help us in our efforts to achieve these objectives. Charlotte, Adam, thank you for joining us today. I know you're wanting to be up and around, so take over the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you all had the opportunity to get some sugar because I do not play the harmonica. So I'm super pleased to be here. I'll let Adam introduce himself. We're going to sort of tag team on this a little bit. But I'm Charlotte. I'm the Director of Grant Development for the Recycling Partnership. I have been with the partnership now for a little over a year and a half. I come from a deep municipal background. I know many of you because I participated in this meeting after spending 22 years working for the Solid Waste Department with the City and County of Denver. So that is my background, and I'm going to let Adam introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Excellent. Hey, everybody, I'm Adam. I serve as the Director of Materials Advancement at the Recycling Partnership, which is a very funny job title, meaning that my work is all focused on specific packaging categories in the recycling system. I've been with the organization a couple years now, and my background is predominantly working with brand owners and retailers on their packaging. So lots of corporate sustainability, lots of anxiety about EPR that I'm quite familiar with from the producer community. Love working at the partnership because I get to match that world with more of Charlotte's world, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today.
Great. All right. I will get started. We sort of went over the introduction. So the reason we are here, we are the Recycling Partnership is a national nonprofit 501c3 organization. We've been in existence for about 9 years. And we are a mission-based organization, and we are troubled by the fact that less than half of the recyclables in the United States get recycled every year, and we want to change that, and we know that we have to work across the system to do that. So we are all about, our main goal is we know the recycling system has to change. We need to look at systematic change to make it work. And we cannot do that alone. There are multiple players in the system, and you can see this circle. It comes from people in their homes, to the municipalities, to the haulers, to facilities and infrastructure, to sort the material, to suppliers, to manufacturers, to brand owners, to retailers. Everyone needs to be part of the solution. And we've been working in an environment with not as much legislation. We know legislation is happening now. I'll touch on that a little bit. But really, trying to engage every piece of this circular economy to make it work. And we do that, we look at opportunities to learn, to review data, to create best practices, to provide tools, all to help communities and to drive some of that system change. Adam and I work specifically, we're a small organization, we're about 80 people, a little over 80 people, and we work on the system optimization team, which is basically a group of folks who works with grants, technical assistance, and materials coalition, and our Center for Sustainable Behavior and Impact. All of these systems are here to kind of help you at the community level. We've got some folks that work with the brand owners, with the manufacturers, but that's not necessarily our role in the organization. So what's happening? The recycling system is kind of broken, and we've identified some key systems to change it, but there are some problems. We have a lack of access across the country. We're only collecting about 32% of the material. We're finding that communities are starting to have to pay more for recycling than they are for disposal. And so the ultimate fate really does, again, rest on that broad stakeholder group that needs to work together to find solutions. So we're not afraid to talk about how the system is broken and then opportunities to fix it. There are 30,000 plus communities in the United States, and there are 9,000 different programs. We're all doing something just a little bit different. And there are some major gaps, too. The green dots on this map show curbside programs. The darker green dots show areas where people opt in and don't automatically get service. The yellow dots show some drop-off programs, and then the orange dots show nothing, no access. It's pretty monumental of a problem, but we're not afraid of that. We know that in urban and rural areas, we struggle with people, no access to service, opt-in programs, or subscription programs that charge extra, which really disincentivizes participation. We're seeing programs across the country with staffing issues, costs, contamination challenges, lack of resources for education, aging infrastructure, and drop-off systems that aren't really truly accessible without driving long distances. And so I should back up a little bit. I forgot to mention, we focus very much on like at-home recycling. That's really one of our major charges. Until we solve that problem, we're not dabbling too much in the anything out of at home. So we also look at multifamily, right? We haven't solved the single family challenge, and we also have not solved the multifamily challenge. And again, we see lack of service. I think there's something like 13 million multifamily units that don't have access across the country to recycling. And the same challenges as single family: contamination, capture, access, engagement. And then we have the facilities that need to sort the recyclables, the MRFs. We have MRFs that are aging 30, 20 years old. Equipment are going down. They're having labor challenges. There's opportunities there, but there's also missing recyclable materials because of the capture. There's yield loss because there's material that's going through the system and not getting captured. So lots of things to deal with there. But I'll stop talking about all the challenges, because I know that happened this morning because I've sat through the municipal meeting, and it is. And we know that you all have challenges, and that's why we're here as an organization, to just try to help develop some of those best practices and tools to help you. And I hope you'll see that, and I hope this presentation will sort of spark some conversations later in the meeting to look at opportunities where we can work with you specifically. So I'm going to talk, there's lots of opportunities for solving this system, and we've developed what we think is a 5-point plan, and I'm not going to talk about all of those today. I really want to talk about the things that you all have some opportunity to control or influence, and that is the people in your community and making sure that they know how to recycle in your community. I want to talk about how do we help you provide equitable access, and I don't necessarily mean equity from the sense of like people's demographics, although we will talk about that, but I want to there's two types of equitable access we talk about. One is equity when it comes to it's as easy to recycle as it is to throw away, meaning if you've got a trash cart at your house, you also have a recycling cart, equal access. And then we'll talk a little bit about equity and making sure that the different communities and groups in your municipality know how to use those services. And then we're going to talk a little bit about MRFs too, and the opportunities there to advance and make some changes. So we've been working with hundreds of communities for the last 9 years, collecting data. And what we know is there's about 800 pounds of recyclables available in the average household across America. And we know that if you make the right investment, there's an opportunity to capture more of that material. And this chart just really shows what happens depending on the type of service that you offer your residents, what your opportunities are to capture the material. A high-performing program captures 600 plus pounds of material per year per household. If you don't do education or you don't do consistent education, you may drop down to about 400 pounds per household. If you don't have carts, you're going to drop even lower. So it's a progression. So if you are starting from nothing, we hope that we can help you not progress through this timeline, but jump from the start to the end versus progressing through it. We also know that you're dealing with lots of challenges with MRFs, and so there is an opportunity. There are definitely deserts in the country that need new infrastructure. And we've tried to identify some of those, and I see Brenda smiling at me. But there's also lots of opportunities for upgrades, improvements, equipment upgrades. The technology is improving. So we actually offer a line of grants that I'll talk about that looks at how to get better technology in the MRFs. There's an opportunity to control the MRF environment from your level through processing contracts and through your hauling contracts. If you don't have a direct line to the facility that's sorting the material in your community, you should really be thinking about how to get a direct line, whether that's mostly through contracts if you don't own and operate your own facility. So having the ability to know what's accepted in your program, how to talk to your community about it, and have some control over the materials that are going into the carts is a big opportunity for the folks in this room to have some control and some input. And then obviously there's not one solution, and we've talked about there's not one party in the solution, there's not just one solution. And so we look at how do you stack investments. Once you get access for your community, whether that's curbside, multifamily, or drop-off, how do you make sure you're collecting the materials that you need to collect? And then how are you educating your community to not only get those materials, keep out the wrong materials, and then capture the maximum amount that you can. So there's still it's a lot of work to do. I do want to just touch on policy because I know that's a big topic, and Adam and I are by no means policy experts, but we have been hearing about EPR and EPR as a solution, and I would just like to show you. We think EPR is going to have a big impact in the 4 states that it's in, and we're very keenly watching it. We have a team of folks who spend all of their day job working on policy and looking at how to harmonize it, just as Scott mentioned. And we think right now the 4 states that have passed it will probably raise the national recycling rate by about 4 to 5%, which is great. It hasn't moved in a long time. But I also don't want to forget about the rest of the country, and that's where we will continue to work in the states that don't have the policy. Because when I overlay it on that map, it's still a really small percentage. So policy is not there to save us yet. And so that brings me to another reminder of things that the folks in this room have control over, or hopefully some control. And that's looking at, let's not forget about local policy. I'm just curious, how many communities in the room have just a basic hauler licensing program and knows who's operating? Yeah, just a handful of you. That's like a base level policy where you can just have your haulers register so that you know that they're operating in your community, what they're collecting. It's also an opportunity to get some initial and early data. And then there's a whole slew of tools from like what some advanced communities have in the pricing that they charge for trash. Do they require commercial multifamily? But these are all things that aren't state level policies and can happen at the local level. And then so how do we fit in, and what are the resources that we can offer? I just want to brag a little bit about some key stats that we've accomplished in the last 9 years. And that is we've been able to capture 1 billion pounds of new recycled materials. We've done that through providing 282 recycling grants to communities for about 1.7 million carts that have been placed on the street. We've provided education and free resources to 3,600 local programs, and we've granted 81 processing facilities. So we think that's pretty impressive. And we do that through our strategic grant making program. I think depending on where you are in the country, you think of us for different things. Recycling carts are our bread and butter. If you are a community that's looking to put recycling carts on the street, we can support you with that. We are dabbling with some drop-off centers around the country. We are looking at testing and measuring some best practices around multifamily recycling, MRF improvements, contamination reduction. And we do all this with the goal of collecting data, learning, and helping communities. Our cart-based grants are fairly robust. We cannot pay for everything, of course, but we offer up to $15 per cart per household. And that works out to roughly about 25% of the cart cost, so it's not nothing. And then if we deliver a grant to a community, we deliver it with education support. We do not want you putting a recycling cart on the street without helping you with education and outreach. And so each of our grants also comes with $1 per household for education and outreach, along with technical assistance. And like I said, our goal is to be low barrier. And so we are looking to make this process as simple as possible, and we have an ongoing RFP and application for carts. We will fund drop-off grants. This is just an example of some of the things we will pay for, but it is across the board. We're looking to, especially in rural areas that don't necessarily have access to curbside, how can we gain access to for them for recycling programs? Multifamily, these are some of the things we will provide funding for in multifamily units. So I'm going to step back just a couple of examples of communities. We were just starting a project in San Marcos, Texas, to look at some multifamily work, and in Tampa, Florida. So we work across the country. And then for our MRF grants, we don't do new build construction necessarily for MRFs, but we look at material-specific equipment. How can we help you add polypropylene to your facility? What equipment do you need? How do we help clean up the PET stream? And I will let Adam talk more about this, but just some examples of things that we will do as far as MRFs and the materials that we have grant funding available for. And so our grant priorities are, again, to help solve some of those gaps I talked about earlier. New access. How can we get new access in a community, access to households that never had access before? How do we get new tons and better tons into the stream? How can we clean it up? If we're looking at drop-off sites, are there hub and spoke opportunities? How can we get more material through the system? Is drop-off a precursor to curbside? If we get a community excited about their drop-off program, does that lead them down the road to curbside? And then regional opportunities and looking at MRF shed opportunities. If we've granted a MRF, how do we support the communities that are feeding that MRF? So we're looking across the country when we do grant making. And then technical assistance. Some of you might be familiar with a lot of the resources that we produce and best practices. We have a guide. I mentioned having some control over your MRF, whether that's contractually or through your hauler, but we have a guide to good best practices on how to do that contracting process. We produce a state of curbside report periodically. That one says 2020. Stay tuned. There's a new one coming out soon. And then we look at accelerating behavior change and what are some education best practices. As we've granted communities and supported them with the rollout of new services, we've also fine-tuned a lot of the education and outreach material that we produce. I really like this clock in the front, by the way. Sorry. You guys might not be able to see that. And then free education resources. If you are a community or you have someone working for you that does education in the community, we have easy to use campaign builders and toolkits and anti-contamination toolkits on our website. You basically have to log in, answer a few questions like glass in, glass out, do you accept these materials? And it will upload your logo and it will pre-populate some easy to produce resources, whether you want to do posters or send a mailer or do some cart tagging and some auditing. So great tools available for communities. And then we've also got the best practices. I talked about some of the guides of what to think about while you're producing education material. You don't want to just put a list of things on your postcard and send out a list that sort of bores people and isn't exciting and interesting. So thinking about all the things that need to go into effective outreach, making sure you have pictures, making sure it's visually appealing, and lots of great tools in our kits. And then equitable outreach is a big conversation now. We have data that shows that communities of color typically are 50% less likely to have access to recycling and effective messaging. So thinking about, education is a challenge for some communities. It's going to become even more difficult, but also because you're going to have to start thinking about one size doesn't fit your whole community and how do you tailor some of your information. And we have a great new tool that I'm going to let Adam talk about to also continue to help with some of these resources.
All right. Just wanted to see what was so great about this clock. We still have time. That is good. I need a clicker.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so as Charlotte teased, excited to unveil, I think, a new tool that we've been working very hard behind the scenes to create, and also a very sincere invitation for you to participate and for you to help us help the entire recycling system. So again, the way I want to think about it is we're going to re-ground ourselves into the arguably funny ecosystem that is recycling, that involves so many of these different stakeholder groups that each play such an important role. You, the communities, are arguably kind of in the very middle. You're the ones who see all of the material that producers put on the market. You're the one who has to find a solution for it. You're the one who has to contract with the haulers and potentially the MRFs, understand the way that the markets are going, all of those things. So we know that you want to be a better recycling program, and what we work to do is help you have the tools and resources to do that. We also watch you, not in a weird way, but we measure some of the things you're doing from time to time, maybe without you knowing. And brand owners and their partners in the packaging supply chain are doing the exact same thing. They want to know, if I make this kind of container, how many people are going to be able to recycle it? In their kind of business terms, it's, will my consumers like this packaging, or will they not like it? They have more sophisticated marketing terms than that. You get my drift. So we wanted to build a tool that kind of matched all of these things together, kind of a one-stop shop that you could use to get those tools and best practices, to learn more about your peers' recycling programs, and also a way for the brand owners and their partners to learn from you, your information, and your data. So we created what we call the Recycling Program Solution Hub, and this is a brand new platform that we're really proud of. It is exactly what I hope I just described. It's a way for you to get access to our resources. You can also zoom out from your own community, see how your surrounding communities are doing, see how your state's doing. You can zoom all the way out to the national level and ask big picture questions like, what's the type of packaging that most recycling programs can accept and can't accept? You can even get communities that are similar to yours. I know that's important because I advise my local county where I live on recycling. And anytime we have an idea, they say, oh, well, Albemarle County could do that, but what's Loudoun County doing? What's Henrico County doing? What's Fairfax doing? And part of me is kind of like, it's okay to think for yourself, but I get it, right? You guys need to have these comparisons. So we wanted to help you get those. So yeah, we have been watching you behind the scenes. And so our Recycling Program Solutions Hub is not a blank slate that needs a bunch of data to be populated in it. Some of the maps that Charlotte showed you with all the dots on them, that's all coming from a back-end data platform that we call the National Database. It's pretty uncreative. The National Database is literally everything that we have been able to learn about community recycling programs and MRFs. So everything from, how often is the collection? Is it rolling carts? Is it bins? Is it single stream, dual stream? What's the contamination rate? What's the education budget? What types of materials are accepted? All of those, because that helps us do our job better and understand where to better strategically issue grants. Do some regions need more TLC than others? And yes, they do. So what we're doing now is we're taking this behind the scenes national database and we are making it a publicly available platform. And to do that the best way, we want to crowdsource your validation and verification of what we think we have learned about your recycling programs. Very confident that we've got most of it correct, also very sure that we don't have all of it correct. So I'll get back to the hub itself in a couple slides with a more direct invitation for you to check it out. But before I get there, I want to just explain a little bit more about how we view the importance of this. So we know that you'll get the value out of it for getting the tools and best practices, benchmarking against your peers, connecting with each other, because you can put contact information in your community's profile. We wanted to educate brand owners and their partners, as I've described, to help them learn from you what they should and could be doing better. So we know that consumers are confused about what should go in the bin, and that through all of your best well-intentioned efforts, the confusion can be reduced, but probably not eliminated. And so we believe strongly that there's a real multi-pronged approach in order to communicate to consumers what they should recycle and what they shouldn't recycle. And so we asked ourselves the question, what if a consumer could look at a package itself and tell if it was recycled exactly in their community? Not if on a national average it's usually recycled, but what about where you live? So with the Recycling Program Solution Hub feeding information back to our national database, we can do that. We can get a zip code level piece of information into a consumer's hand about a specific package that they're holding. Just to kind of drive this home a little bit, we've done the homework here, and we've conducted focus groups and ethnographic studies, and we've learned that people do want to be able to pick up something and see if they can recycle it. And right now, I'm sure we've all got our kind of favorite stories about the way that labels and messages are put on pack, right? If it just says, please recycle, or recycle if facilities exist, like people know what that means, or any other number of variations there. The point to be made here is that there is a pretty strong body of evidence suggesting that people will, in fact, look at a package, and if there's a QR code on it, they will scan it if it's easy, and then they will follow through on the information they receive. So we call this program Recycle Check, and we are just now rolling this out. It's pretty much coinciding with our release of the Recycling Program Solutions Hub. And it is exactly what it looks like. So if you go to the grocery store and you buy a pint of blueberries, it could have a QR code, probably not so prominent on the front, probably on the back. And then this is live right now. So I want to invite everyone, please get out your phone. It just takes a second, I promise. This is my proof to you that consumers can do this because it's so convenient. Go ahead and scan the code, and then it should take you to a page where you enter your zip code. And then Recycle Check should tell you, can you recycle this type of package? I forget if we call it a plastic clamshell or a PET thermoform, something like that. Is it working? Thumbs up? Yeah? Nods? Can't skip because I'm in your way? No. Sorry. All right, so here's the real question. Who found the correct information? Who found incorrect information? No one? Oh, wow, that's great. Plastic berry container, so specific. And it is, I know that. Good, so it works. That's great. This is the first time where not a single person has raised their hand to say that it's incorrect. And then usually I get to say, well, that's just all the reason for you to please log into our Recycling Program Solutions Hub and make sure we've got your recycling program's information correct. So we're rolling out that Recycle Check program. It is very much going to be in a sort of pilot phase for the initial few months. So not on shelves yet, but it is coming. All right, a little bit more about the Recycling Program Solutions Hub. Clearly, you do not need to log into it to tell us if we have the information right on your acceptance of plastic berry clamshells, which is wonderful. But there are a number of other benefits to it. And again, just to kind of pile on how we try to make these things easy, this is a little snapshot of what the process looks like. We try not to put a big burden on you. We have staff, human beings, who will make sure that you are, in fact, the representative of your community's program. We have safeguards in place, so it's not as though anybody can go in and edit the information for your program. It has to be you or one of your peers. And we will review and approve any edits that you make. So it is that kind of like wiki model, and we serve as kind of an editor. And then we especially do want you to visit to get those benefits for you, comparing to your peers, learning about the tools and resources from the Recycling Partnership. Here's a little bit of a snapshot of what the actual hub looks like once you're in. And so I guess the text got a little blurry on you, but we even have a function that we're rolling out where you can push a button and the hub will recommend similar peer communities to yours based on the appropriate characteristics. So, you know, back for me in advising my local county, when they say, what's Henrico County doing, what's Loudoun County doing, I could say, well, those aren't even really good comparable peer programs. Let's push this button. And oh, and as a matter of fact, it's, you know, Greene County or Bath County, who knows? So here's a snapshot of some of the types of dimensions of your community and your programs that we're hoping to capture. Suffice to say, we are not expecting to get 100% of everything for any community. You know, things all the way down to what's the contamination rate the last time you measured it? Not everyone knows that. Show of hands in this room, how many people do know their average contamination rate in the residential recycling stream? Okay, yeah, about 10% maybe. Please don't feel the pressure to tell us everything that we want to know, but we do hope that you'll take advantage of this. And again, this is a way for you to not only help yourselves and your peer communities, but also to inform people who are making big national decisions on packaging. Should they put blueberries in a plastic blueberry container? Should they explore a paper alternative? Recyclability is a really, really powerful marketing tool to brands, and they take it very, very seriously. This is the best way that we think we can actually get them accurate information on recyclability, the ground truth. Is this item accepted in a number of communities? We've gone through most of this. I guess the last point for me to make here is that we are working to get kind of like almost an artificial intelligence style set of recommendations for you. So based on the dimensions of your community, its size, potentially its region, the type of recycling program you have in place today, the more that you can tell us about the key characteristics of your program, the more our platform can tell you, well, here are our top 4 or 5 recommendations to drive up your recycling rate and drive down your contamination, and then we'll link you to those tools and programs as well. We're also rolling out courses and kind of online seminars on topics that we're still brainstorming today. Things like, what are best practices for negotiating a contract with haulers? What are the best practices for addressing folks in multifamily homes? All of those things. What are the best practices for local policies? So all of that is there in addition to the core of the partnerships resources that have been there for a long time, like our DIY toolkits and such. So my big invitation, I hope I've pumped you all up enough. Please, smartphones again. You don't have to do it right now, but would love for you all to kind of like flag this for later. I know, Britt's Pub tonight, dinner, and filling out your information in the recycling program. No, but please do. Big invitation from us to work with us on this, and we do hope that we'll all benefit from it. All right, so the last section that we wanted to cover today is more of my day-to-day corner of the recycling partnership, which is material-specific initiatives. And I'll tee it up like this. So the recycling partnership, we got the data. And so we call them household generation and capture studies. We pick communities and we go into people's homes and we measure what's in their trash and what's in the recycling too. And so we know, and this isn't terribly groundbreaking, this has been measured a number of ways, but we know on the household level how many pounds of each material are going to be there. And I'm not sure there are a tremendous amount of surprises here, right? There's a lot of paper, glass is heavy, plastic is light, right? All those things. But point being, they are different. And so much of our work on recycling addresses all the materials together. Getting carts in a community that doesn't have carts is good for all the materials. Getting better education in a community is good for all the materials. Our CEO, Keith Harrison, is very fond of saying, we're all in this bin together. And that's true. However, another dimension of our thinking around improving recycling is to think about the specific materials. So just as I said, we know how much is in a household, we also know how much gets into the recycling bin versus the trash can. And these numbers continue to surprise and amaze us. And again, these are not estimates, these are field measurements. And so even things that we think are, mainstream, very well understood recyclables, like a cardboard box, somehow almost 30% of them end up in the trash and not the recycling. I do a lot of work on aluminum. Where is it? 44% aluminum cans. And these are households with a good recycling program. More than half the cans end up in the trash and not the recycling. So clearly, some material-specific interventions are needed to get these numbers up. So consider a few things here. So not all materials are created equal in terms of tonnage. Not all materials are created equal in terms of what we call household capture. They're also not all equal in terms of environmental benefits. Recycling, another world of mine, recycling PET bottles has a more pronounced greenhouse gas benefit than recycling glass containers. Nothing against glass, just the way it is. So, let's get this all out in the open. We don't have time for that. All right, so if we think about taking a material-specific lens to boost the overall health of recycling, we think about these kind of different gates that determine if one of those material categories is going to get to its happy home. So, and we've gone through most of this already. Does a recycling collection program exist, right? That's step one. Okay, if it does it accept the type of material in question? A lot of my work is in PET, the number ones. Soda and water bottles, accepted in basically every single collection program. Non-bottle PET, like the blueberry clamshell, accepted in, something like 55 to 60% of the programs. Very different. Next, okay, it's accepted in the program, but are people actually acting on that? Are they putting it in the bin? And of course, the slide I just showed you says that they're trying sometimes. Next, we have to ask ourselves, and I guess there's another one in there, do they participate at all? Because we know that some people who have great recycling collection programs, for whatever reason, do not use it. And that is material agnostic. They are all not in the bin together. But even when people do participate in the recycling program, they still don't treat all the materials the same way. All right, and then kind of lastly here, and this is a lot of the area of my work, what happens after it's collected? It goes to a MRF. A MRF gets 100 units of material. What comes out the other side? Not 100 units. So there are losses at the MRF. We measure our recycling rate after the MRF. Recycling rates are usually measured as the amount of material sold by a MRF or similar equivalent to a reprocessor, a recycled paper mill, a plastic reclaimer, something like that. Kind of a funny place to measure the recycling rate, in my opinion. That's a story for another day. But there are losses at the MRF that drag that recycling rate down. And then last but not least, at that paper mill, at that plastic reclaimer, at that aluminum mill, there are further losses. They call them yield losses, right? They're in the business of manufacturing feedstocks. They don't think about it as losing recyclables. They think about it as kind of an unavoidable business loss. And let's give all these folks a break. They are, to be crude about it, they're trying to make pristine manufacturing feedstocks out of garbage. But those losses there are all material that ends up being disposed after it's gone through all of these gates to get so close to its finish line. And wanted to acknowledge that this idea of investing in the success of materials and recycling has varied histories for materials. So it used to be what made free market sense, and that goes all the way back to ancient times, where if something was useful and there was a value for it, a recycling system would be created. And then somewhere along the line in the past few decades, there was understood to be an environmental benefit to recycling. And so then it wasn't just this kind of free market business driver, it was also an environmental ethos. And now we're entering kind of the next era where it's all of those things plus corporate stewardship, producer responsibility, this idea that corporations, corporate America, is somewhat accountable for ensuring the success of these recyclables. To drive this home a little bit more, again, back to our berry clamshell, what did I call this? Non-bottle PET recycling. So this is based on recycling partnership data. We chose California as the example because if you look all the way on the right, based on California's EPR law, plastic packaging categories like non-bottle PET have to achieve a 65% recycling rate, or by the most strictest interpretation of the law, it will be illegal to sell it in the Golden State. I think it's 2032. That rate has to be achieved. Our estimate is that right now, this packaging category is at a 17% recycling rate as measured from what gets sold by the MRF. And as we can see, California, basically everyone's got a recycling program, but only 77% of the population's programs accept this item. When you take into account the number of people who don't participate in the recycling program at all, or do participate but choose not to put this item in the cart, that number gets whittled down to 31% of the total. Factor in losses at a MRF, and flat plastic things tend to not do very well at MRFs. That number goes from 31% down to 17%. So for all of the stakeholders who are vested in the success of recycling, we have to acknowledge that to get to something like 65%, there has to be some pretty heavy-duty interventions at each one of those gateways. And this isn't even taking into account all that yield loss at the reprocessor. And that does matter because say what you will about the brands and retailers of corporate America, they really do want to have recycled content for new packaging. Healthy conversation of how much they're willing to pay for it. But recycling rate is one metric of success. Another very important metric of success is how much recycled content are we creating? How much new virgin material are we actually offsetting? Let's keep in mind that that's one of the primary reasons we do recycle. So let's talk about a few of the material categories that the Recycling Partnership works on. As I've said a few times, a lot of my work is in PET. I lead an initiative we call the PET Recycling Coalition. And those are some of the challenges that we're working to solve. And so we've measured, just the same as we've gone into the household and understood what gets into the bin versus the trash, we go into MRFs. Our partners have put RFID tracking tags on PET containers, and we measure what happens to them. How many end up as contamination in paper? How many of them make it to the plastic container line? How many of them evade the optical sorter that's there to catch them? How many end up in MRF residue? The punchline is, it's really not as good as a lot of us would like to believe. You put 100 soda or water bottles in the front end of a MRF, you might get 75 out the other side. Those are losses. That represents material value in the financial sense. Also greenhouse gas emissions. It's kind of silly to take the long way to the landfill when another one of our main goals here is to draw down carbon. We don't want to send materials to a MRF and then back to the landfill. If we look at those PET clamshells, trays, cups, the PET items that aren't bottles, it gets even worse. And so we've measured 3 MRFs. The worst one was losing, if I remember, like 48 or 49% of all those non-bottle rigid PET items. The best MRF, I think, was still losing about a quarter of them. And again, various places, a lot, maybe like 10% are ending up in paper. So that's not just bad for this mission to collect and recycle more plastic, it's also bad for paper. When you get to a PET reclaimer, whatever gets there from a MRF, they're not doing as well as they'd like to either. And, I was at a reclaimer who shall remain nameless a few weeks ago, and I'll make up the numbers, but I'm not exaggerating much. They were saying, we were doing, 1.7 million pounds of throughput, and our machines just, we haven't been able to keep up with the upkeep and the maintenance, and, we're probably down, to 1.4 million now. And it's like, wow, all of you and us have worked so hard to get PET to the reclaimer where they can turn it into recycled content, and they're losing a lot of what comes in their front door, just the same as the MRF. There's a little nuance here. Half sounds scarier than it is because that also takes into account things like labels and moisture that were weighed as PET, but again, recycling measurement is a dark pit that we probably ought not to wade into today. The way that our initiative is addressing that is through the power of our granting program. And so we are actively seeking MRFs and PET reclaimers who are willing and interested to upgrade their equipment, even if it's not new equipment and they need some help getting what they need to do maintenance and upkeep. We can give a grant for that. And so our work in PET is a little under 2 years old now, and we're very pleased to have issued a number of grants to MRFs and reclaimers across the country. To give you an idea of some of the benefits that those grants have been able to catalyze in not quite 2 years, it looks something like this. So a lot of millions of pounds of PET. Again, this isn't new PET that consumers are now putting in the bin. It's PET that was already in the system that was kind of falling through the proverbial cracks. I won't go through all of these, but one big emphasis of our work in PET is getting more access to recycling those non-bottle types. That's a fast-growing category of packaging because, believe it or not, brand owners are exiting polystyrene and PVC, and they are replacing that many times with PET shapes that are not bottles. So it's an important category, and if we want to boost the overall recycling rate, that's one to focus on. All right, switch over to polypropylene, so the number 5s, all of our margarine tubs, yogurt tubs, sour cream tubs, pretty much all the tubs. If it's not clear and it's plastic, it's a tub, it's probably polypropylene. Somewhat similar story there, but this work is focused primarily on expanding access to polypropylene recycling, and more often than not, that is I'll call it a straightforward game, it's not, of finding a MRF who is not able to sort polypropylene, pre-Chinese import restrictions, maybe they were making a mixed plastic bale and the polypropylene went there, and then that market kind of got scary and they said, oh, no more polypropylene. We'd love to help those MRFs get an optical sorter or a robot to pull the polypropylene out into its own stream. It's kind of crazy that this has been the line for, I think, like a decade now, but somehow it's still true that polypropylene recycling is a nascent stream. Lots of folks are still working to bring it online. There is pretty voracious demand for recycled polypropylene, and we're not even mature enough with polypropylene recycling to put it back into the sour cream tubs. Right now it's going into things like auto battery cases and paint cans, and that market is so hungry for it. So just imagine once we have the technology to get recycled polypropylene aesthetically suitable to go back into packaging. So the Polypropylene Recycling Coalition is a bit over 2 years old. They have focused exclusively on providing grants to those MRFs who want to get the dedicated sorting equipment, and they've had a lot of success. Through those grants, we have enabled an additional 10% of the US population to be able to recycle polypropylene when just 2 years ago they were not able to. So that's the power of using MRFs as the catalyst to all the communities in each MRF shed. Big importance to many of the brands and retailers who support our organization through funding contributions is that ability to call polypropylene recyclable. And again, lots of brands are starting at the point of saying, okay, we have to get out of polystyrene, we have to get out of PVC. What are our choices? Polypropylene, is that any better? We're going from non-recyclable PVC to non-recyclable polypropylene. It's a bad business proposition. So these things matter from a business perspective too. When an item gets a better recyclability story, it's going to get more market share. All right, a couple more. Switching over to aluminum cans. Again, you know, these numbers, they surprise us. You know, we know that aluminum cans, you know, not adjusting for relative weights, they're the most valuable item in the residential recycling stream. Also have a very pronounced ability to draw down greenhouse gas emissions when they're used to offset virgin aluminum production. Yet, you know, less than half of them are getting in the bin in the first place. And then even, you know, every single MRF, for the most part, has an eddy current separator that has one job: detect the cans, shoot them over the barrier into the aluminum stream. A typical MRF can lose up to 25% of those cans. You know, talk about an easy conversation with a MRF. Hey, how would you like to capture an extra 15 or 20% of your cans? That typically goes over well. So again, we've got a grant program that's there exactly to do that, and I thought it might be helpful to bring this to life a little bit. One of the grants that we issued recently is a MRF outside of Houston, and you know, I'll share it. Like, it wasn't a very big grant, you know? Like, we're talking about an eddy current separator. It's not a, you know, AI embedded optical sorter with a QC scavenging robot. It's a very tried and tested piece of recycling equipment. 293 tons per year. Cool. 19.8 million cans. And so we need to do like how many swimming pools or football stadiums. It's a bunch, right? Like, I don't know, like, can anybody picture what 19.8 million cans looks like? It's probably like from here to the moon and back or something. One grant, one MRF, 19.8 million cans. We've been doing this work just a couple years in earnest. We've been able to issue grants to, what is that, like 10 MRFs? So not everyone has had the pronounced benefit that Houston MRF has had, but we are enabling the capture of millions and millions and millions and millions of cans, again, that have always been there in the system, but they have fallen through the cracks of the recycling infrastructure. So I think, last but not least, our fourth material-specific area of focus is film and flexible packaging. Not a very friendly phrase to most of you, and that's exactly why we want to work on it. So the current system for film recycling isn't great, and lots of good people are working on it with smart ideas and good intentions, and the recycling rate for, you know, monomaterial polyethylene film packaging, the simplest stuff out there, is something like 5% on a good day. So that system isn't working, and we have to acknowledge this is the fastest growing category of packaging, and it's got its environmental benefits, just not recycling. It's material efficient, it's weight efficient, it's carbon efficient. When we take tuna fish and take it out of a steel can and put it in a little pouch that's a couple grams of polyethylene and maybe a layer of nylon, there are big environmental savings from doing that, but then it's a problem because it screws up the rest of recycling. So we have challenged ourselves, our funding partners, and the recycling community as a whole To answer this big, kind of scary existential question, what would it take to turn, what I'd wager is probably your number one most despised contaminant into something that actually is a revenue generating value stream in the recycling system? Lots of people working on this. New ideas are out there, artificial intelligence and vacuum sucking robots and other things that I can't really comprehend yet. Slow road, long way ahead. Nobody gets to declare any success over mainstream curbside recyclable films and flexibles for a long time, but that's kind of the point. The train has left the station on film and flexible packaging. It is going to be an ever-growing part of the stream. One way or another, we have to find a solution for it. And so we're starting now with ideas like boutique in-markets that make roofing material or building products, or companies like Trex that's doing the plastic lumber that's able to take the polyethylene things, and then a few things that are slightly varied from that. And eventually, we'd love to have a system where consumers can put their film and flexibles in the bin or the cart, and then it can go through the entire system to become new recycled content for new film and flexible packaging. So without a doubt, one of our most aspirational and ambitious challenges that we are trying to meet with a level head. All right, so I'll stop there and save our last few minutes for questions and discussion. Again, driving back to our kind of home base here, we really, really want to emphasize that in our view, the success of the recycling system depends on the success of all of these interconnected players. We're admittedly a cheesy organization, but partnership is in our name for a reason. Everything we can do to build bridges between each of these stakeholder groups to collectively boost the success of recycling is what we want to do. Want to acknowledge our funding partners, the vast majority of whom are major brand owners, retailers, packaging suppliers, and affiliated organizations. We can't do our work without the financial support, the contributions of these organizations, and also their expertise, because there are lots of very good, sincere, well-intentioned, smart people working in these companies who would very much love to be in this room talking to you so that they can learn and bring that information back to their companies. And they know things that we don't sometimes. And so our funding partners are the reason that we're able to do our work, and I wanted to acknowledge them. Okay, we've got a few minutes, and you can ask Charlotte anything.
Well, first of all, let's give a big hand to Charlotte and Adam. There was a lot of information I am so excited about. I have a lot of questions myself, but I'm going to give you guys the chance to ask questions. And as Bob is doing, please be sure to come to the microphone so if anyone's listening in at home, they can, or at their office, they can hear.
Thank you, Charlene. I have a question for both Scott and Charlotte. Charlotte, my question has to do with the CART grant program. I'm working with a number of clients that are more rural and are trying to make the decision between drop-off and curbside carts. And we've been looking at everything from density to quantities collected, et cetera. So I was wondering about the criteria for carts. And then Scott, my question is are you familiar with the initiative here in Minnesota with MyPlas and plastic film packaging and the new basically facility that's being built in Rogers, Minnesota? If you're not, we should share that with you.
Yeah, I can answer that one quickly with a regrettable no, but I would love to learn more about it, and more importantly, I'd love to get my colleague who leads our film and flexibles work connected to it.
Well, you talked about how important that is in terms of future waste stream recycling opportunities, and it's a significant one here. So thanks.
Thank you for highlighting it.
And Bob, to answer your question about carts, we will grant a community of any size if they think it's feasible to run carts for recycling. And what I normally tell people is if they're running carts for garbage and they're collecting curbside garbage in a cart, then they can probably make recycling work. It's just a question of cost.
Anybody else? Come on. I know I have a million questions. No. We got a microphone over here.
All right, so hello. All right, my question is around the recycle check. So companies are going to be putting this new QR code on there. will these companies also have how to recycle on there, or how were there conversations between the two different systems? And is this going to be a thing that is slightly going to confuse people to have both options on there, or what conversations happened around one or the other or both?
Yeah, this is an important question. So, and for those of you who, if anyone's not familiar, so how to recycle is the kind of like black and white rectangle that's on a lot of packaging that has kind of the standardized information. I used to work for the organization that administers that program. We talk very, 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 very regularly between the two programs, and both organizations are very keen on synergizing and harmonizing them. The best opportunity we've identified right now is that the How to Recycle program has technically 4 labels: store drop-off for film, not yet recycled, widely recycled, and the dreaded check locally. And so it's check locally that is the chasing arrows that are kind of grayed out with check locally written over it. And I think everyone can acknowledge that there's room for improvement on that. So that's the label where we're exploring changing that grayed out Mobius loop with the QR code. So we know that the How to Recycle program has done a good job. Consumers know to look for it. They expect to see it. And we don't think that they're checking locally all the time. So I think what remains to be seen is the best way to synergize the labels when something is designated as widely recycled by the How to Recycle program. And so that means that at least 60% of the population has a program that accepts it. And it's also, an item that's known not to be disruptive in any other way in the recycling system. I think that's an important kind of open question. If something is accepted almost everywhere, does it still need to have a QR code? And I would wager if it's an aluminum can, probably not. If it's a PET bottle, probably not. If it's a polypropylene tub, I think there might be an argument. So it's those kind of conversations that are shaping our thought process. But most importantly, we just want to emphasize, we're both very committed to making both of these systems work.
Okay, Connor's next.
Hi, Connor Riffle from Rubicon. First of all, that was awesome. Thank you. I love the QR code. Very cool. I wondered if you could comment on pay-as-you-throw and whether you see more uptake or more expansion of pay-as-you-throw, or you hope to see more expansion for pay-as-you-throw as a way to incentivize more recycling at the local level.
I don't know that we necessarily have a position at the partnership. I mean, we just look at all the tools that are available and what the benefits are. It's not something we go out and advocate for. I think it's just something we acknowledge that it has an impact. I would just say from my own personal experience, I'm not seeing a huge number of communities changing, but it is a tool that can help. And certainly for folks who are like general fund right now and have no fee, a fee can certainly help. If they're a flat fee, doing a variable rate can potentially help. So I think it's just, again, it's that layering of tools.
I just want to say thank you to the Recycling Partnership. You gave us a grant for our new MRF for part of our polypropylene system, so we really do appreciate that. And I would love to look at a couple of more grants because we have some other things going on. So first off, it was a thank you. Second, I have a question about, and the Film and Flexibles did kind of tweak the question. We would love to collect more material. I think there's not anyone in this room who would not want to get more out of the waste stream as much as they can. And from my perspective, I live in a rural state, and getting materials to market, even fiber, aluminum, getting them to market sometimes is a huge challenge, just transportation-wise. And I live in a very small population state, so I don't generate a lot of this material. So my question is, knowing that there's some movement on both film and flexible, have you guys talked with kind of those end markets to be able to incentivize or to help guarantee the transportation? I mean, I might not be able to produce a load of film but once a year. Is that okay? How can we in the rural areas, and I've got a great drop-off program as well, so it's not just curbside, we have both. We have a committed recycling population, but it's getting this material to market. And, if I told my community tomorrow, next week, next year, guys, you can put these in your bins, they would do it the next day. So it's not even that issue, it's generating enough for a load, getting it consistently to the market. And not having to pay for it, right? That's the other piece too. I can move glass all day and I'm paying, a boatload to move glass. But I would love to be able to at least make a little money or break even. As a municipality, I can just break even. So are you having those conversations at all about those end markets to kind of help get them the material that they need?
I'm afraid we probably don't have the best answer for you. I can't speak to the financials. I do feel like we're seeing a lot more activity in the kind of hub and spoke thinking. And something that comes to mind is, we're talking to a MRF right now, not terribly far from you, but probably not close enough, that serves as a perf for 5 other MRFs. And so the surrounding MRFs that don't have the economy of scale do less sorting, and then they send their jumbled mix to the giant MRF, and then it has the economy of scale to make, the truckload per month, the magic number. So I can't say that's a direct focus of ours unless you feel like it is, Charlotte, but it's something that makes a lot of sense. So I think we could encourage it.
I would have actually said somewhat close to the same thing, but probably not quite the same. We focus on hub and spoke for the getting the material in the door. I think we're not quite advanced enough yet to start talking about it on the back end, but it's definitely an area we should be. And I think it can work. It's the front end and the back end.
Okay, I have a question. If anybody who knows me knows that I've been doing this for 22 years, and I said it this morning, and I'll say it again. We can't keep doing things the way we've been doing it. So I'm a big proponent of product stewardship, or any model that gets products and packaging, not just packaging, redesigned, and so that they're either easier to recycle or less toxic, all those kinds of things. So I was really interested in what you were talking about. The California Product Stewardship Law about packaging sets targets that are clearly designed to either make the manufacturers make the product more recyclable or change the packaging. And so I'm just wondering if you can comment on, since you're working on those single commodities, what do you see coming of that? Do you think it will be successful in one way or another?
Yeah, it's an important question. My sense of it is that EPR is accelerating a trend that has been there for a while. And so, for better or worse, the most robust guidance of do's and don'ts for packaging design has been with plastics. And the organization APR, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, has what they call their design guide. And I've talked to innumerable packaging engineers who have a printed copy of that on their desk. And it used to just kind of be this, oh, nice to have, hey, we're making this packaging, but check the APR thing and see if it's good or not. And then that slowly started to change into, okay, we've actually got a corporate goal to make 100% of our packaging recyclable by 2025. How do we define that? Well, it has to meet APR's design guidance. Through a few other organizations, the Recycled Paperboard Technical Association comes to mind. We've seen somewhat similar guidance come about for paper packaging. Our organization, in fact, put together design guidance for steel packaging, which essentially said there's not much you can do to screw up steel. But brands have been taking that seriously. EPR will make that a little bit more heavy hitting on the bottom line of the company, at least in theory, because Scott Cassell talked to us about eco-modulation, and one of the key tenets of eco-modulation is if something is disruptive to the recycling system, it gets a penalty. So you're not just paying the cost of recycling that troublesome material, you're also kind of paying a penalty, an oops fee. There are studies in Europe I've seen that suggest that it's more of a theory that doesn't quite hold up in practice, but that's also going to help. Programs like How to Recycle have done a good job because they don't just take into account whether or not it's a category that is accepted in bins and carts. They'll also ask the question, does this conform to APR's design guidance for plastic? Has it passed the lab test protocol for repulpability if it's a paper item? If you don't pass those, you don't get a favorable recyclability designation, and I just can't say enough. That is a marketing claim that matters to the Unilevers and the Procters & Gamble's and the McDonald's. They will change the design features in order to get that marketing claim, and I don't want to be too crude about it, but just to put it in real business terms like they often do. Our Recycle Check program is going to follow a similar tack. the Recycling Partnership convened what we called the Circularity Council, which was about, I think, 30 individuals, half from the brand owner and retailer and packaging world, half from the recycling world. And we kind of like, it was before my time, I have no clue what it was like, but our colleague who led it got everyone to agree on some ground rules for what needs to be true in order for something to be called recyclable. And that was translated into what we've called, oh gosh, Residential Recyclability Assessment Framework. We got to come up with better names for these things. We didn't have a slide for that today, but it is a conceptual framework for all materials, regardless of type. And so it's questions like, are you following the kind of industry consensus best practices for design, like APR? Is there a look-alike problem? Okay, Colgate-Palmolive, you made a recyclable toothpaste tube, but there's still 99% of them that are not the recyclable toothpaste tube. Those kinds of tough questions. And so our aspiration is for Recycle Check to be, for packaging, to be assessed against that framework before it's issued a Recycle Check designation. So again, that same business driver of kind of playing off the marketing value of recyclability is how we're hoping to make those changes. And then I think I also deserve a shout out to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who has gotten basically every nameable company to promise 100% recyclable plastic packaging by 2025. More importantly than that, they have to transparently report on it. So Planet Earth gets to see how Mars and Nestle are doing designing for recyclability. That stuff matters too. That's, in business terms, that's reputational risk mitigation. So, all these things combine, EPR and marketing and, reputation. I do think there are changes, not to say that there's not still a long way to go.
Thank you. That's a lot of information, and it just generates more questions, but we don't have time for that now. So save your questions for the fun bowling tonight. Yeah. Lawn bowling. Yeah. Okay.
Lawn bowling.
That concludes the agenda for today. Let's give them one more round of applause, please.